Love and loyalty do not mean tolerating abuse. When we excuse harmful behavior in the name of love, we're not being loyal to our children, we're being loyal to dysfunction. True love includes boundaries. It includes truth, and it includes valuing yourself, not just as a parent, but as a person who matters. Hi, I'm Barb Nangle. I want to welcome you to my podcast, Fragmented to Whole, Life Lessons from 12-Step Recovery. If you're tired of feeling fragmented and overwhelmed, this podcast is your guide to creating a life of wholeness, authenticity, and healthy boundaries. I'm a woman in recovery who is also a boundaries coach and speaker. I share raw and honest insights from my own journey and the principles of 12-step recovery. Discover how to set boundaries without guilt or shame, overcome people-pleasing tendencies, manage your emotions effectively, cultivate a stronger sense of self, and build healthier relationships. My approach is raw, honest, and sometimes a lot sweary. I'm an avid beachcomber and a formerly closeted fan of the Hallmark Channel, especially Christmas movies. I wear fingerless gloves almost all year round because my hands are always cold, and I love taking pictures of license plates with my initials BN on them. I don't speak for or endorse any particular 12-step program for recovery. Though I'm a huge fan of 12-step recovery and a member of two such fellowships, I cannot speak for them. If you're ready for real talk and practical tools for transformation, keep listening. This is episode 303, When Love Means Letting Go, How to Break the Cycle of Codependency. I had a conversation with a client of mine who has two adult children, both of whom she has very codependent relationships with. One of them has mental health issues and has been really abusive to my client. This was the first time my client admitted that to me. She told me that a number of other people have told her in the past that her daughter was being abusive to her. As our conversation progressed, my client admitted, "I will tolerate anything from my children. Anything they do to me, I guess I believe that's somehow loving to do that." And then she said, "I would die for my children." And I said, yes, of course you would die for your children, but not at the hands of your children. If you dove in front of a bullet and saved your child, that makes sense. And most parents would do that. That is noble and good. But if you die because your child kills you by violence, or they kill you by bleeding you dry of all energy, emotion, and sanity, that is not okay. That is not noble, right, or good. We then got into a conversation about the idea of tolerating things out of a sense of loyalty. I told her, this conversation makes me think of one of the issues that sometimes arises when people first get into ACA. And for those of you who are new to the podcast and don't know what that is, ACA is a 12-step recovery program called Adult Children of Alcoholics and Dysfunctional Families. I'm a member. It's a trauma recovery program where you reparent yourself and you use the 12 steps to recover. There are myths and misconceptions about this program, especially among people in other 12-step recovery programs. One is that people think that all people in ACA do is sit around and bitch about their parents, and it's possible that might happen occasionally by an individual person, but that's not what the program is about. The program is about getting down to causes and conditions, like it says in the big book. It's about understanding what happened to us, knowing that we are products of our environment, so we can understand and learn how we got to be the way that we are. Then we can heal the relational trauma that results from the intergenerational family dysfunction. Another myth is that we're somehow being disloyal to our parents when we start to tell the truth about what happened in our families, like sharing family secrets and talking about the abuse and neglect that occurred. What we say in ACA is that you're not being disloyal to your parents, you're being disloyal to the dysfunction. There are a few ways that you're being disloyal to the dysfunction when you tell the truth about what it was like in your household and in your family. One, you're no longer pretending things are okay or that they weren't that bad. That is, you're being honest. This is a break from one of the primary dysfunctional family patterns, which are don't talk, don't trust, and don't feel. In this case, you're breaking the don't talk rule, and you're also breaking the pattern of dishonesty and pretending. Two, you're coming out of denial when you name it for what it is. For labeling something as abuse, that's abuse, as abuse, rather than saying it wasn't that bad, or at least they didn't break my bones, like what happened in that other family, or my parents love me, they just didn't know how to show it. Now, I want to say something about that too. Just because you grew up in a dysfunctional family where there was abuse, neglect, or abandonment, that doesn't mean your parents didn't love you. Now, that might be true, but it's not necessarily true. Love and abuse are not mutually exclusive. So you could grow up in an abusive household and still be and feel loved by your parents. Now, coming out of denial is a huge part of recovery in ACA. I have a number of episodes on coming out of denial because it's such an important part of the recovery in ACA. And I record a new episode when a new level of denial comes to my awareness. Now, when you put up with anything your children do, no matter what it is, or when you excuse their shitty and possibly abusive behavior by saying things like, she doesn't know what she's doing because she has a mental health disorder, you're not being loyal to that child. You're being loyal to the intergenerational dysfunction. But when you accurately call it abuse or neglect or abandonment, you're no longer being loyal to the dysfunction by pretending it's not as bad as it is. And three, you're also being disloyal to the dysfunction rather than your family when you get into this program and change your ways and change the legacy of dysfunction to keep from passing it down to your children. Now, even if they're grown, you can change the way you interact with them to at least change your part. Now, that could be by no longer tolerating their abuse, as I'm coaching this client to do. All right, now back to the conversation with my client. We then transition the conversation into talking about what is tolerance. And my client said that what she's basically internalized about both loyalty and tolerance is, I don't matter. She said, what matters way more than me is my children and their happiness. And that makes total sense that a parent would say that. But if your child's, quote, happiness rests on them abusing you, that's not okay. In this case, my client is defining her child's, quote, happiness as not making anything difficult for her, not pushing back on her shitty behavior, not setting limits with that child and letting them get away with anything they want. That is not okay. And it should not be that you will tolerate anything for their happiness. If what makes your child, quote, happy is abusing you, that is wrong and not okay. This idea, I don't matter, is a huge issue for so many of my clients. Like this client, many of them would rather not rock the boat with their adult child. So like this client, they take abuse from their child rather than disrupt the pattern of dysfunction. For this client, up until now, she'd rather do that than potentially make her daughter's life more difficult. So this young woman last year came to stay with her mom ostensibly for 3 days and ended up staying for 6 months. During that 6 months, the house was filled with chaos. The physical environment was chaotic. The emotional and psychological environment was chaotic. There was a lot of noise and a lot of disturbance all the time. Then when she left on a trip, my client couldn't help but notice the huge contrast between how disturbing that time was because of how much peace she has now. But she's still having a very hard time with the idea of not letting her daughter move back in. Now, the way that I talked to her about that, since she's in AA and has been sober for years, is that not letting a toxic person back in the door is the same as an alcoholic not taking the first drink. For people in codependent relationships, we can't let them in the door, or that would be like an alcoholic taking the first drink. Especially in a case like this, where she let her adult daughter stay for 3 days and it turned into 6 months. When you don't let them in the door, you don't have to worry about getting them out 6 months down the road. So you want to prevent them from coming in the door in the first place. If you take one thing away from this episode, let it be this. Love and loyalty do not mean tolerating abuse. When we excuse harmful behavior in the name of love, we're not being loyal to our children, we're being loyal to dysfunction. True love includes boundaries. It includes truth, and it includes valuing yourself, not just as a parent, but as a person who matters. If you're struggling with this, know that you're not alone, and I would love to work with you. Recovery is about unlearning patterns that were handed down to us and choosing a different way forward. It is never too late to change. I am living proof. My ideal clients are professional women who say yes when they really want to say no, and who neglect themselves because they're so focused on others. What I've found is that most professional women feel overwhelmed. You keep giving in to others and take on too much. You're afraid of disappointing others or being seen as selfish, so you don't say no. When you even think of setting boundaries, you get flooded with guilt and shame. The reality is that things will never improve until you stop putting everyone else first. To get the life and relationships you want, you have to stop ignoring yourself and start focusing internally. If this sounds like you, please sign up for a free 30-minute Better Boundaries call with me at barbchat.net. If you like this podcast, and I'm guessing you did because you're still listening, you will also love my weekly newsletter, Friday Fragments, which has short essays similar to the podcast. You can check it out at fridayfragments.news. That's fridayfragments.news. If you haven't already subscribed to my podcast on your favorite podcast outlet, please do that. It helps carry the message to more people. I started this podcast because there was so much wisdom in recovery that just wasn't making its way out into the world. So I want as many people as possible to hear it. I'd also love it if you'd leave a 5-star rating or a review, which you can do on Apple Podcasts. It helps other people find it so they can get the benefits that you've gotten from listening. If someone in particular came to mind when you listen to this episode, please share it with them. And my favorite place to hang out on social media is Instagram. I'm at Higher Power Coaching. Please DM me there. I'd love to hear what you got from this episode. I run private and group coaching programs on building healthy boundaries. Whether you need help with boundaries in your personal, professional, or romantic life, I can help. Head on over to barbchat.net where you can get on my calendar for a free 30-minute Better Boundaries consultation. I also do short-term situational coaching to help people make it through specific situations they're going through, such as divorce, empty nesting, preparing for retirement, or any phase where their identity is shifting. Regardless of the type of coaching, my ideal client is someone who is ripe for change. If that's you, I'd love to work with you. My goal with all my work is to help you make lasting changes in your life, like I've made deep, lasting changes in my life. Remember, it's never too late to recover. No one is beyond hope, and healing is possible. Thanks for listening.